Hello and welcome to my interview today, my live interview for Victorious Souls podcast. I'm Danielle Burnock from danielleburnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet, for those of you who are not familiar with me. Today, I have with me a woman named Jennifer Sienes. She knows what it's like to learn how to grieve and how to surrender her life to Jesus after suffering multiple traumas, not in childhood either, in her adult life. I talk a lot about childhood trauma. I bring people on here dealing with childhood trauma, but all of hers that we're going to be focusing on this in this interview happened in her adult life, quite a string of them. Her story is quite impactful. And right after this, after healing from this, after going from survive to thrive in her life, now she writes women's nonfiction books to bring hope and grace to your life. So welcome her as I bring her in, Jennifer Sienes, as she is going to help you learn how to deal with the hard things in life by sharing with you how she has done that herself. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining with me today for the Victorious Souls podcast. You there?
I apologize. When you took me out of the room, my AirPods totally disconnected. So they're no longer working. So I apologize. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's there and I'm not.
Technology is great when it works. I say that all the time because it's so true. I've had it hang up on me in the middle. Technology does things. And this gives me the perfect opportunity to focus on, this is why I do things live. I do my interviews live on purpose. The only time I've ever edited them is when it has dropped and I've had to cut out because nobody's there to bring it together. But I want people to get the real. This is live. This is real. They get our screw ups. They get, oh, I didn't mean to say it that way. Oh, I mispronounced that word, whatever, because this is us. This is real life. Trauma is real things. Healing is real things. Hard things in life are real. And I want people to hear the real and see the real. So that's why it's so important to me for these to be live. So we have technology does things that mess up sometimes.
We do. Test our patience.
But it does. That's so true. It tests our patience. And sometimes I pass and sometimes I don't. I think today I passed.
Awesome.
So before we get into all the things that happened to you, what was life like before all of that, before the trauma hit your life? What was your life like before that? Give us some context. Who was Jennifer Sienes?
Oh my gosh. I was a mom, first and foremost, a mom raising my kids. I was a middle school teacher. I thought life was pretty perfect. Aside from writing, my other dream was to teach. And so I was able to do that and went back to school. My kids were both in school and finished my degree and got a master's in education, and I was teaching. So life seemed like it was pretty good. Things were going around rather smoothly until things started not going well smoothly.
Right. Then it was a little bit like Job is what it feels like, and while he was yet speaking,
It felt a little like that. It did.
So share what happened. What were these things and how did this unpack your story for us, please?
Well, to start off, we were unaware that something had happened to my son. He had been sexually abused, but we were not aware of it. I saw a change in him. And he was, when he's at that age, 11, 12 years old, you expect some kind of hormonal change. I chalked it up to kid stuff,
Right.
A straight A student, all of a sudden not doing well in school, couldn't get his homework to school. Friends he was popular, and all of a sudden those same friends were turning on him. It was just a hard thing. And in hindsight, I believe, and people may not agree with me, but I certainly believe that Satan got a foothold into our home when that happened. And it happened in our home when we were gone. So there was a lot of that happening. So he was sexually abused unbeknownst to us. I did not find out until 10 years after which was a long
So
time for him
common.
to live with it.
Yeah.
And then a couple of years after that abuse, he was acting out he went down to the elementary school and with a bunch of friends, and they vandalized the school, which was completely out of character for him. He was arrested. He turned himself in basically. When they asked him, he said, "I did it. I was wrong. I did it." He was arrested. And in the midst of us going through that, he had a skateboarding accident and had two skull fractures and was metaflighted with a two skull fracture. So he was in the hospital for a while. We knew nothing about traumatic brain injury, but he did suffer some traumatic brain injury. So things just were kind of going south for us. We had been trying to
Yeah.
move closer to where my then husband could work, and everything just seemed to go wrong. Just seemed to go wrong. We finally got moved. It was a bunch of a hassle to get there. Housing was difficult and poor choices. And let me put in here, financial hardships were happening, even though my ex-husband and I both made very good money. He
Mhm.
would fill his heart with things, brand new cars constantly. And
Mm.
so it would cause problems when trying to buy a house, because in the midst of them doing that, he went out and bought another car. And you
Oh,
know how that,
wow.
so that kind of hit funny. So we finally get into this house. Things seem to be going along pretty well. And then my daughter is in a car accident, and she's metaflighted as well. She was in a coma for a week with traumatic brain injury, woke up on Christmas Day, and that is really when the work began. I had no idea. Our son had had traumatic brain injury, but it was minor. He never passed out. He had skull fractures. She was actually in a coma. And it
Wow.
took weeks of inpatient therapy. She had to learn everything: how to walk, how to talk. There was not a bone broken except for the head injury, but she could not walk. She couldn't even swallow. They had to teach her how to swallow so she could
Oh,
eat. She
wow.
had to learn. It was like taking a newborn and then raising her right back up again.
Wow.
And
How old is she?
she had just turned 18 like the week before. And we had struggled because she was at that age where I'm an adult, I can do whatever I want. And she and I
Oh,
were
yeah.
just butting heads all the time. And I actually was driving to school one day. We had just had another argument. It seemed like it was always happening. And she did not want to agree to disagree. She wanted either you agree with me or I'm going to keep arguing with you. That 17, 18-year-old that you just want to rattle. And I was driving to school after that day. And you know how you get from A to B and you're not quite sure how you got there because you don't remember the drive? It was
Yes.
one of those instances where my mind went on autopilot, and I could only call it a vision. I had this picture in my mind, like I was daydreaming, that I walked up to my vice principal's office and there was a police officer waiting for me. And he told me that Nicole had been in this horrific car accident and they didn't think she was going to live. And I shook myself out of that dream and I thought, what kind of a parent am I? Was I wishing that on my child? I was sick. I literally sick. And I just kept praying that God would keep her safe, that he would forgive me for those thoughts that I thought that I had conjured them up. 2 weeks
That's
after
so
that,
like us to blame ourselves for things.
you come up with something. It's like, well, that's my sin nature. I came up with this all on my own. Satan put this in my head, whatever. What I come to find out was it was God preparing my heart, because that
Mm.
exact thing happened 2 weeks later, the week before Christmas. My vice principal came down to my classroom. She said, "You're needed up in my office." I didn't think about it, but as I approached her door, all of a sudden it hit me, and I opened the door and there was a CHP officer to tell me that my daughter had been in this accident and they weren't sure that she was going to live. So
Wow.
it really rattled me, hugely
I'm
rattled me.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So she was in the hospital. She woke up on Christmas Day, and then 8 weeks inpatient rehabilitation, 8 months of outpatient rehabilitation. So I had to drive her an hour and a half each way twice a week for speech therapy to learn how, memory issues, a lot of memory issues. Most of it was memory, short-term memory loss. Never did
Wow.
remember the accident or the days before or after it. She lost probably a month of her life. She has no recollection of any of that time.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So then seemed like things were getting back to normal. My mom was diagnosed with leukemia and she thought she would beat it. She said it's CLL, chronic lymphatic leukemia. They figured, she would survive it. It wouldn't be a problem. But my husband was acting really weird, like very disconnected. And I just remembered thinking, maybe I'm not giving him enough attention. Maybe I need to shift my thinking. And I came home from work one day and he said, I don't love you anymore. I haven't loved you for a long time. And I want to live my own life. I don't want to live your life anymore. And he was gone, 23 years of marriage out the door. So that was a year after. In fact, it was Christmas time. He walked out on Christmas Day the following year. And Nicole's accident happened at Christmas. He walked out the following Christmas. And for the first time in my entire life, I went from living at my mom and dad, living with my college roommates, and being married. I'd never lived on my own in my life. And there I was by myself because the kids went with him. My son was really gifted, very gifted in music. And there was a program where in Sacramento, it was Sacramento, California, they moved to. And my daughter was going to school there and she couldn't commute very easily. So they just all moved. And so they moved into a 700 square foot apartment and I was left in a 2,100 square foot house by myself.
Wow.
So yeah, it just was a whirlwind. It was a whirlwind, and at that though, I attended church every Sunday. I prayed my rote prayers every night, the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Acts of Contrition. I did those things, but I always felt like there was something hugely missing, that God was pulling me toward him and I was stonewalling him because I didn't know what that would look like. I was afraid that if I really gave into what he wanted me to do, then I would be doing something I didn't want to do.
Oh yeah, you are not alone with that. That's
Is he
like,
going to send me to Africa? Is he going to, what's he going to do with me if and it's so funny in hindsight, knowing the truth of how God works, that he plants the desires we have in our heart. I mean, those things, like the writing was planted in my heart from the age of 12. That's when I knew I wanted to be a writer. My mother always told me I should be a writer. She was always encouraging me. And it was just planted in my heart there. And I know now that the Lord put that in my heart so he could use it for something great.
mhm.
You have nothing to fear with God asking you to do something, because he's going to give you the desire to begin with. And then he's
Yeah.
going to equip you to do it. And then
Mhm.
he's going to carry you the whole way. I mean, it's just a beautiful picture of how he is, a merciful, graceful Lord. And what he does for us, it is mind blowing. But at the time, I didn't have that. So I hit my knees and I said, okay, I have been trying to control my life from forever. Middle
Well, how
child,
long after all of that did that happen? Because in the beginning, you weren't responding in that same way. At first, you responded very differently. How did you respond initially to all of this happening in your life?
I was a mess. But my brother, who had become a born again Christian, had called me after Nicole's accident. He said, don't blame God for this. And I said, I don't blame God. I never have. I believed in the Lord. I did not understand the gospel message. I grew up in the Catholic Church. You're not, at least then, I don't want to slam anybody who's Catholic, but where I grew up, in the church I grew up, we were not encouraged to open the Word of God. I had no clue what the Bible said. And I thought I could just control everything. And if my kids would just be good enough and I could do this enough, and if I was perfect enough, my life would be fine. And I realized it wasn't fine. So after my ex-husband walked out, that's when I was on my knees and I said, oh, okay, I'm not doing any of my life well. I don't know what I'm doing. I'll do anything you ask me to do, anything. Just if you could bring one good thing to me so I know you're with me, just one good thing. And
Wow.
that
Yeah.
following week, a friend of mine that I taught with, a Christian friend, came to me and she's like, Jennifer, my church is starting a new Beth Moore Bible study. Do you want to come with me? And I thought that was the one thing I needed. And I said, I definitely want to come. Who's Beth Moore? I'd never even heard of the woman before.
No, but
And
a friend came alongside you
yes,
to help you. I want to pause there for a minute for people to savor that for a moment, because we need people. We need each other. And when someone reaches out to help, oftentimes we'll push it away because we expect that
exactly.
we need to do it ourselves. Like you were talking about the control kind of thing, and even the
Mhm.
earning thing. If I'm good enough, if they behave well enough, and that's all about
Right.
earning. And that is a messed up way of thinking that
It
hurts us
is.
in the end. But then here came this friend with an offer for help. And because you received her offer, you got the help that you were crying out for on your knees.
Exactly. And she was an amazing, I walked alongside her through a horrible divorce. She had a very abusive, unfaithful husband who just pushed her. And I walked alongside her through that. And then here I was when she found out, because it was Christmas time that my marriage ended. We went back to school, and first day at school, I pulled her aside and I said, Cindy, he left me. And she started crying so hard. People were coming up and comforting her to find out what happened to her. That's the kind of friend she was. And I
Yeah.
got to just kind of sneak out, and then they're all, what's going on, Cindy? Are you okay? It's kind of funny in hindsight, but yes, I knew she was a Christian, and we talked about God all the time, but I did not really understand that message. And she never pushed it until she knew that I needed it. And then there she just was coming alongside me.
Yeah, well, you had done life with her in her pain. So when you were in pain, the two of you had created that safe space already,
We had.
because you had walked through her pain with her. When she reached out, there was that safety there, because safety is another important aspect of healing that is needed. So that's really
Absolutely.
amazing. That really shows her heart. When she cried like that, it really shows her heart of compassion, which deepened, I imagine, your sense of safety with her. Wow,
Well,
she's even protecting me now from everyone coming around me. They're all looking at her, and I could just
yeah.
scoot out the back.
And that exactly. But she and I had been, it's funny, I ended up, the way I've met her, this is really kind of funny. This is how God works. You cannot you cannot believe in coincidences when you see God at work. Her ex-husband hired me because I was doing house cleaning before I went back to school to be a teacher. I was cleaning houses, and then I was in school and cleaning houses because I was doing night school and working during the day. And her ex-husband had hired me to clean their house because I was also the 4-H advisor for our 4-H, and he was the ag advisor for the county. So I knew him through there. He hired us. I met her while I was in her shower cleaning it. She came home one day, and there I was. That's how we met. And then she said, oh, you should come work at the middle school. And I'm like, I'm never working in middle school. There's no way I'm teaching middle school. And that's exactly where I landed. And she and I, from that very moment, were like bonded together. So it's just, you don't know where he's going to show up. Don't don't dismiss anything that he might do. You never say never. You just don't know where he's going to show up, or who he's going to bring alongside you, or who's going to be that person that is significant in your life that you don't expect.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. That's so cool. Well, you did more work other than just falling on your knees and going to this Bible study. You did other things on top of that to go from survive to thrive. What were some other things that you did as well?
Well, at first it was a lot of Bible study and digging into the word and going to a church and being fed where I could really be fed. I did, I got remarried not long after, but when I got remarried, I went into it and I still had this abandonment issue going on, being abandoned. And it was hard. And my poor husband, I had been married since I was 20. He hadn't really been married at all. I was married for a short time to a woman who was not faithful to him. And so we got married. He was 53 years old and I was 44. And here he had never been really married before. And here I'd been my whole adult life married. Try to put two of those people together and see how that works out, because it's not, he was very independent and I had become needy. I never before that had felt needy. I thought I was pretty strong. And then I just felt like he's going to leave me. Why would he stay with me? If my ex-husband, who isn't half the man this guy is, can't be with me, why would he stay with me? And I could see I was having these, I found out later, there were panic attacks, reactions to things because I was scared. And when I would have these, it was very emotional, and he would back away because it scared him, which made it worse for me.
Oh, right.
So I saw this pattern happen. Yeah, you think. And I remember near the last time it happened, one of these things had happened, and I went down to apologize. And he said, you know what? You're not the one who needs to apologize. He said, I was down here thinking and praying, and I realized you need me to come towards you. You need me to hold you, not to abandon you. And that's what I've been doing. And so it's perpetuating whatever's going on. And so I decided I wanted to go get some Christian counseling. I thought I need to get counseling because I'm going to destroy this relationship. And I had a wonderful Christian counselor, and my degree was in psychology. So it wasn't like it was all new to me. I knew intellectually what I needed and what I was missing, but it took somebody there to sit with me and point these things out. And he said, you have got so many scars in your psyche from all the grief and the loss that you have gone through. And oh, I forgot. In the midst of all that, my brother committed suicide. My Christian brother, who brought me to Christ, committed suicide. And I was angry and I was lost. And he gave me this Bible when my ex-husband left me for my birthday. And it said, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He Philippians 4:18, he put that in there. He said the Bible is a basic instruction before leaving earth, is an acrostic that he put in that Bible. And I remember looking at that after he killed himself and just saying, why could you believe this for me, but you could not believe this for you?
Yeah.
And what I discovered was that he had bipolar disorder, was misdiagnosed, mismedicated, and that led to that. My son, who was sexually abused, also has that same bipolar disorder we've now discovered, and PTSD because of the molestation. So he's really struggling even now, but he's getting there. I see the Lord healing him, even though he doesn't believe anymore. I think God's got a hold on him and he's protecting him. But so all that was happening. So I had all these things going on. And so this counselor said, every time something happens, a scar is getting nicked, and that scar gets nicked and it's opening a wound all over again. You have not taken the time to grieve through all the loss. Even if your life is wonderful now, you have to grieve. You have to grieve the loss of your marriage, the loss of your children, what your hopes that you had for them. You have to grieve that loss. You have to grieve the loss of a life that you dedicated everything to for years. You have to grieve that loss.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you'll never get through it. And so it was, and I'll remember this. Any adult should get this book. It's a children's book, but every adult should read this book. It was Max Lucado's, You Are Loved or something. It's with the Weebles. You know, the one with the puppets.
You Are
It's
Somebody?
Like, no,
You Are Somebody?
Maybe it is You Are Somebody, but it's the one with the puppets with, I still have it. I don't have it with me right now, but it's a hardback, and it's like this little guy. Either he has to be, you get a star or you get a blot on you, depending on if you're really, people think you're great, you get the star, but if they don't, you get the blot. And he was full of blots, and he couldn't, he didn't know that he was loved. And the only one who really mattered, the only eyes that really mattered were those of God, his creator. And so I went through that book. He said, I want you to take that book. I want you to read that book every day for a week, and I want you to journal it. I was blubbering like a child. I mean, the first several times I read it, and I handed it to a friend of ours, a husband of a friend of ours. He started bawling when he read it. So, I think a lot of people need that message in such simplistic terms. It's all in the Bible. It's very clear, but so simple in a children's book that it could really impact your heart in that way, where you can see it for yourself.
Well, one of the things I want to connect that to that you had said to help illuminate this, because I love what we're talking about right now. People need to know they're loved. That's my core message. People need to know they're loved. That's why I'm that lady on the internet who loves you. People need to know they're loved. We're created in the image of love. Love is our greatest need. We need that. That's why that book speaks to that. People need that love. But you talked about, you have a degree in psychology. You knew in your head all the things that you needed to do, but you needed someone else. You needed that counselor. You needed someone to help you apply that to your life. And we need that. And when someone is looking at that book, you talk about they were blubbering, they're getting someone helping them to see something maybe they know intellectually. Maybe they've heard that. I heard Jesus loves me and God loves me for a long time. And I got born again and was following the Lord, and he was working on things, but it took him 34 years to convince me that he loved me, because one of my major traumas was in that specific thing. And I've learned I'm not alone. There are many people out there that believe God loves everyone else but them. And they need someone else to come alongside. Have you seen, I brought this up the other day, and it's great. Never seen the movie, the old movie, Father of the Bride with Steve Martin.
Yes,
and when
I saw the original one.
Yeah, no, I know that one. We watched it so many times with my kids growing up. But I love this because it illustrates this so well. She brings her fiance to meet them, and they're going to go out, and mom and dad are shell-shocked. you know, it's chilly out there and dad wants to help his baby girl. He loves her. Says, you know, you need to take a jacket. And she's like, no, I'm fine. But the fiance says, oh yeah, you should take it with you. Oh, okay.
Okay.
And right there is a thing. People need to hear the truth from someone they can hear it from. If they hear it from someone who they're like, oh, well, you have to say that, or I don't
Exactly.
believe you, for whatever the reason is, it's not going to get through. Sometimes it needs to be said in different words because it's Christianese. I've heard that all my life and I don't care. I don't like it. I don't believe it. But then they hear someone else over here that talks in a completely different way. They go, whoa. And with that book, it illuminates it in a completely different way, like a parable. I've read that book with it's like a Pinocchio kind of thing.
Sorry,
It's
you are
just
special. That's it. You are special.
yeah. But we were
That's the name of the book.
yeah, there we go.
We both have the name wrong, but you are special. Yes.
Yeah, and people need that. That is
Yeah.
the core. We need to know that we are loved. That was the very thing that Satan attacked in the garden. You know,
Absolutely.
do you think God's holding out on you? You're not special. Do you want to really be like God? They already were like God, created in the image of God. But he created FOMO in their heart. I'm missing out on something. God's holding out on me somehow. It's like, no, we need to know the truth that we are loved. That is the core. And you got that message of love. You shared with me before about your mom, how she grew up and she was afraid. She had so much fear in her. There was too much sin. You know, she was afraid of going to hell because there was too much sin. Oh, the love of God, the blood of Jesus washed it away, not covered it, washed it away, like gone. People
Right.
don't hear that enough. They hear, you know, well, have you sinned since you last prayed? And then people are afraid they're going to go to hell. It's like,
Right.
it is not like that. The gospel is simple. That's why people follow Jesus. There's a lot of people not following the church because they're not giving the gospel like you hadn't heard. The gospel is God loves you. What are you going to do with that? Go
Right.
talk to him. He wants a relationship with you. The two of you worked it out. He moved everything out of the way so that you could have that. And then
Well,
you
then
learn all the details down the road. He works everything else out. He's the creator. He's the one. He's the redeemer. He takes care of all the details. Like you said, in
does.
your life, all the details. He put all these people you met, all those little details. There are no coincidences.
Well, and then in the midst of all that, as my mom was dying, and my mom had a strong belief in God, but I remember when I was a teenager and I went to a Bible study, it was like, oh, my mom was, worried about me leaving the Catholic Church and the whole bit, and that didn't happen. But when I did leave the Catholic Church and I was studying the Bible and my mom was dying, I spent a lot of time. Another blessing, my ex-husband walked out on me. I had no, aside from my job, I had no responsibilities. My parents lived 4 hours away. So I would go up there and spend the weekend so I could be with my mom, take her to chemo when she needed it if I was on break, or go to church with my dad because my mom couldn't even go to church anymore. She was bedridden by that point. And I remember my mom calling me one day and she said, Jenny, I'm just so scared that maybe there's a sin I've committed that I can't not be forgiven for. And I said, Mom, I said, there's no such thing. I said, did you ask God for forgiveness? And she said, I have. And I said, if you sinned against somebody, did you ask them for forgiveness? And she said, I have. And I said, then it's done. That's why Jesus died. From that day forward, I would go to visit my mom, and that Bible was in her hand every time. That was the one book she would read every single day. And when she died, there was so much peace. She knew where she was going. And it was such a gift to be able to be part of that with her, to share that. It's like the timing, God's timing is perfect. He put me in place where I could be there for my mom when it was her time, so that I could just be there and give her the security and the words that she needed somebody else to say to her.
Yeah. And see, there it is again. You said it to her. She heard these other things, but you had to come and reframe it for her to go, oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's what I hope that this interview is going to be doing for people, to help them go, oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And that sounds like what your books are too. Perfect segue into your books, because you write nonfiction stories to bring hope and
fiction.
grace.
I write fiction stories.
Fiction. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. I know
it gets backwards all the time. People, it is kind of backwards, It's nonfiction. It should be not fiction, but it is fiction. So it's fiction.
Yeah, you write stories. You write fiction stories.
Right.
I said it wrong. My bad. But what you do with that, because you're writing a story, is you're reframing it in a new way so that you can help people to see and then go,
Oh.
that's what it sounds like. That's what tell us about your books.
Well, I have two series right now. The first series was the very first book I wrote. We'll get back to that one. We were talked about that one, has been rewritten so many times. But the first one that was published it's called Surrendered, and it was kind of just a fun book to read or write. I mean, and this was the third book I wrote actually. But the characters in here, it's an Irish family with an Italian restaurant, and there's the character of Tess O'Shea. Her father in the beginning has just died, and his will says that if she does not go back to school, because she left school for some mysterious reason, nobody knows why she did. She claims it was because her mom was dying and she wanted to stay home with her. She left school for some mysterious reason. She will lose everything if she doesn't go back to school. She'll lose the restaurant, the home, and she's got a 16-year-old sister. It's all going to go to this other guy, Jake, who works in the restaurant. And he's going to be the caregiver of all that stuff if she doesn't go back to school. So it sets it up. It's more of a romance than anything, because it sets it up for a lot of battles. So that one was really fun because she's pretty snarky. And I admit I can be very sarcastic. That's why I taught 8th grade so well, because they got it, And so she's a little snarky. And then the second book, and it's the Apple Hill series, and Apple Hill is an actual place above Placerville, California, where my grandparents owned property, and I spent my summers. And it's actually it started out as a few local apple farms on Apple Hill Drive, believe it or not. And now there are over 60 farms up there, and there's wineries, and it's quite the destination. And my grandparents lived right off of that road. So that's where I grew up spending my summers. And book 2 is called Illusions. And this one was inspired by my daughter's car accident. And it's not her, but there is a component. There's a teenage girl in here who has the accident like my daughter does. And everything that's in that hospital, in that recovery, came right from my journals, and my daughter was recovering from hers. But it's actually about a pastor's family who's falling apart, partly because of all the expectations the congregants put on them. They must be perfect or they're not worthy. And so it's one of those, I've had people say every church bookstore should have this in there, and every new believer should read it, because it reminds you that, we're not all perfect, including pastors, and to put that on them. Mm-hmm. And then the third book in the series is the first I wrote, and that is Providence. And this one was inspired by my brother's suicide. And I had to write it over so many times, which is why it was published last, because I had to work through such darkness to get to a point where it left hope and joy in the end, in the midst of that pain. So I rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it. And now it's, so it's one of my favorites, actually. It does come across, I love humor. All my books have some form of romance, because I love romance, and they all have humor because I love humor. I love to laugh. So I use it quite well. I've been told I use it quite well to relieve some of the tension in the stories. So that's Apple Hill series. There are also 3 novellas, which I didn't bring up with me, but there's 2 Christmas novellas and a summer novella. And the new series is called the Bedford County series. And book 1 just came out in April. It's called Night Songs. And it's, again, more romance than anything else in this one. And it's about a young woman who was raised by her grandparents after her parents were killed in the Congo as missionaries. And she was raised in Tennessee with 2 brothers as her neighbors. And it's the story of them all coming together. And then I have a summer novella coming out called, I don't know if you can hear it. We have thunder hitting pretty hard right now. Summer novella coming out called A Sojourner Solace, that comes out next month. Another Christmas novella comes out in November. 2 Christmas novellas, one with Bedford County series. One my publisher put together is a Christmas Castle series. And several authors each write their own novella, each based around a castle and Christmas time. So I did my first historical fiction, a castle I found in Ireland. So I did my first historical fiction. And then again, the next novel is already in my publisher's hand, and that comes out next April. So this is like book number 10 coming out at this point.
Wow. I didn't know you had that many books.
Well, some of them are novellas. So, novellas some people don't like them because they're too short, but they're about 35,000 words, so it's not horribly short, but yeah.
That's not short.
Well, they call them short because they're not, like most novels are about 90,000 words. So you're getting almost a third of that in a novella. So,
Okay. All right.
so
I'm not
that's,
much of a fiction reader, so I'm like 35,000 words is a lot for me.
well, I will be happy to send you a copy of Providence if you'd like, because I have some ebook copies that I can send out. But yeah, so Night Songs, book 2 is coming out, like I said, in next April. That deals with a lot. My critique group is saying, okay, this is powerful because it deals with death of a child. It deals with IVF, and how is a Christian with IVF and adoption and all these different things that you can't really say to somebody's face that are going through them. And when it's in fiction, it's not happening to you, it's happening to somebody
Right.
else. And sometimes you can hear the message much better when you can separate yourself from that.
Oh,
So,
exactly. You're reminding me of a woman I know I had on my podcast before who deals with childhood trauma, childhood sexual abuse, childhood trauma, specifically the sexual abuse, working on preventing it. And I was like, how do you prevent that? One of the things, sounds like your book, is you watch how they play, because they will play it out in what they're doing. And so it's like you could enter their playing with, well, why is, Mr. Horse being mean to Mr. Pig or something like that, whatever, because it's taking it outside of the child.
right.
Just like your story, you put it in this separate thing, and it's true. It helps us to see it differently. It's another way.
Right.
That thing we need other ways. That's awesome.
We do. So once this series is over, which it seems like it's going to be forever, but I've already got the first 2 books are done. So it's usually 3 books. There'll be 9 novellas in 3 books. So there'll be quite a few books in that series. Then I'm moving on to, I think I'm going to start going toward romantic suspense, getting away from women's fiction and using more romantic. I've kind of been in the muck and mire for a long time. I feel like God has used that, and it's time for me to step out and do something a little more fun and still have important issues, but doing it in a fun way,
Awesome. Yeah, sounds
Yeah.
great. I wanted to circle back just for a minute back to your book, Providence. You wrote it and
Okay.
rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it. Why don't you just share with the people, what was your part of the struggle that they could probably relate to, of like, because you bring up that he was a Christian, you mentioned that. Was your struggle that because he struggled and he could believe for you, but not for himself? Or was your struggle because he was a Christian and Christians ought not do that? Where exactly was your struggle in that?
Well, I was angry at him for leaving me. I was angry that he could come to me and comfort me with words in the Bible and then not believe them for himself. I was never like, oh, how dare you? You're a Christian. You shouldn't do that. Mental
Okay.
illness is a real thing. And I think part of my fear when this book came out, I was really struggling because I did not know how it would be received. I'm not an expert on suicide, and I'm not an expert on bipolar disorder. So I came at it from a character, from myself, looking at it from the outside, like anybody else, unless you're an expert on it. And
Right.
I discovered some things when I was researching. So my brother was on Ritalin when he was little, when he was young, until about middle school. And there's a high incidence of kids on Ritalin and suicide. There's a
Wow, really?
yes, there's a correspondence to high sets of Ritalin and suicide. So that kind of was shocking to me. And maybe it
Yeah.
has something to do with bipolar. I don't know. But my son was also very hyperactive in that way, where maybe he could have been put on that, but I refused to. And I didn't know about the incidents then. I just did not want to medicate him that way. I
Right.
just was fearful of that. So that was kind of part of it. But just the fact that he would leave, he left 5 kids behind and a wife and a lot of struggles. And I was angry with him because he couldn't tell me. We were very close. There were 5 kids in our family, and I was right smack in the middle of the 5. And my brother was exactly a year older than me. We were both born in January. We were inseparable as children. People thought we were twins because we were so close in age and we were together all the time. And we were very close. And so I wanted him, why couldn't he talk to me? Why couldn't I be there for him? And so part of that anger at him is anger at myself.
Yeah.
So when the book came out and I feared, how are people going to respond to suicide and the church and mental illness? And I was pleasantly surprised by so many people coming back and saying, finally, somebody is open about something that we need to talk about in the church. I am so tired of people telling me, well, if you just had enough faith, you wouldn't be depressed. If you just had enough faith, you wouldn't have this issue. If, that's a prosperity doctrine. It's not even real. That's not real. That's not real life. Mental illness happens. I know our pastor has admittedly told us that he struggles horribly with depression, and his son struggles with depression, and that's a lot of times hereditary. I've got a lot of people in my family that have bipolar disorder. It's not that they don't have faith, it's
Right.
so I was pleasantly surprised. People said more people need to open their eyes and see the reality of mental illness and suicide and what goes on. Just because you have these issues does not mean that you are not a believer in Jesus Christ. It doesn't
Right.
mean you don't have faith.
Right.
I mean, I think about the times my life when I've been hormonal and been really down for a couple of days, until I figure out what it is. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I going to be like my brother? Am I depressed? And oh no, it's just that. But they can't do that. They can't say, oh no, it's just that. It'll be gone in a week. It doesn't go away for them.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody wants to hear it. Because how do you respond to that? My son has told me when he's in a bad time, there are days he doesn't think of anything but suicide. He says, I would never do that, Mom, because I promised you I wouldn't, but it's on my mind. It's like, if I could just make this all stop. And people are not listening.
Mm-hmm.
They're uncomfortable. They want to brush it aside. They want to blame it on this person because their faith isn't strong enough. And it's just not the way it is.
Yeah, it's very complicated. And there's lots of different, it's not as simple of just having enough faith. No, you're right. I have a friend, she wrote a book that she struggled with depression, and she lost her friend to depression who had helped her through some really hard times. She wrote a book called I Love Jesus, But I Want to Die. So I'll share that here, a little plug for Sarah Robinson, who wrote that book. It's an important thing that people need to hear. So a little plug for her book in there too, because it like you said, it's important. The point is to help people. That's why I do these interviews. I want to help people. I want to help you. I want to share your story because you are helping people. I want to share your books because they are helping people. And so before we tie this up, I wanted to just touch on one thing. I know that you wanted to make a point. So what was that one thing that you wanted to tell people who were listening? What was the most important thing you wanted to share?
I think the most important thing is to know that we have the greatest hope ever. And no matter how dark things get, there is hope. And I have seen in my life that God did not let anything go to waste. He uses it for his glory and our good. He does. And I think that's so critical for people when they're going through tough times. I mean, our world is chaotic and scary and crazy. And, but I know it, God holds us in the palm of his hand. And if we are believers in Jesus Christ, we are his children. He is not going to let go of us. And we have that hope and that joy in the midst of the circumstances that might be dragging us down. I think that's so critical.
Oh, it is critical for people to know that hope, to have that, to know that he won't let us go instead of the other things that have been preached out there.
Exactly.
Yes, he won't let us go. Never, 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 never. So thank you. So how can people connect with you? Your website? Are you on different socials? How can people connect?
I'm all over the place. I am on, my website is jennifersienes.com, pretty simple. Facebook is Jennifer Sienes. I have an author page on Facebook. I have a readers group. If you go to Jennifer Sienes Readers Group on Facebook and ask to join, you can be part of the 600 people that are on there. My website, I have blog posts. I blog every single week with either an author interview, a book review. This week I'll be doing something about a little thing I've learned in the Bible and what's really touched me this past week. So Twitter, Instagram, I'm all over the place.
Oh, well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and opening up in all these painful things to help other people have hope in the dark like you found.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Danielle. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you all for being here today, and I'll see you again soon. Like I've said, I'm Danielle Burnock from DanielleBurnock.com. Love yourself from Survive to Thrive, that lady on the internet who loves you. So love you.